The year is 1941. Operation Barbarossa, the largest land invasion in human history, has just been unleashed. Millions of German soldiers, led by their fearsome panzer divisions, advanced across the Soviet border with a confidence bordering on arrogance. Their blitzkrieg swept through Poland, conquered France, and left Great Britain reeling. The Wehrmacht was believed to be invincible, its technology and tactics unmatched. German generals, seasoned in victory and armed with what they considered the best tanks in the world, the Panzer III and Panzer IV, had a profound, almost disdainful, underestimation of their Soviet adversaries. They expected a swift and decisive campaign in a matter of weeks, perhaps a few months, before the Red Army crumbled and the vast expanse of the Soviet Union fell under their dominion. But what awaited them on the scorching plains and dense forests of the Soviet Union was a brutal awakening, a revelation that would shatter their illusions of superiority and fundamentally alter the course of the war. They were about to confront tanks unlike anything they'd ever imagined, war machines that defied their intelligence reports, their tactical doctrines, and their very understanding of armored combat. This is the story of that shocking encounter, the moment when German generals came face to face with the incredible, almost unbelievable reality of the Soviet tank design, and how their initial underestimation transformed into a desperate struggle for survival. To truly grasp the magnitude of this underestimation, we must first understand the German perspective that led to Operation Panzer divisions were the vanguard of the Wehrmacht. Their doctrine, developed by visionaries like Heinz Guderian, emphasized speed, maneuverability, and concentrated attacks, bypassing enemy strongpoints and destroying their command and control. The Panzer III, initially armed with a 3.7 cm Kadabluka 36 46.5 gun, its armor, while not exceptionally thick, was considered adequate for its role, reaching 50 mm on the frontal part of the hull and turret in later models. The Panzer IV, on the other hand, was designed as an infantry support tank, initially equipped with a short-barreled 7.5 cm Kadabluka 37 L24 cannon capable of firing high-explosive projectiles. Its armor was comparable, offering up to 50 mm on the frontal side of the AU. These tanks, coupled with superior optical systems, excellent radio communications, and highly trained crews, proved devastatingly effective against Polish, French, and British armored vehicles. The French Char B-1 tank, with its thick armor, presented some challenges, but German tactics and the timely intervention of 8.8 cm anti-aircraft guns generally overcame them. The British Matilda II tank, similarly, was a tough nut to crack, but it was slow and its numbers were limited. German military intelligence regarding the capabilities of Soviet tanks was, to say the least, catastrophically flawed. They knew the Soviets possessed a vast number of tanks far exceeding their own, but dismissed most of them as obsolete relics from the 1930s. Tanks, like the fast but lightly armored BT series, or the T-26, a development of the British 6-ton Vickers, were indeed numerous, but were seen as easy targets for the Panzer III and IV. What German intelligence failed to understand, or perhaps refused to believe, was the revolutionary leap in Soviet tank design that occurred in the late 1930s and early 1940s. Stalin's purges decimated the Red Army's officer corps, and the Winter War against Finland exposed significant weaknesses in Soviet training and logistics. These factors contributed to the German belief that the Red Army, despite its numerical strength, was a clumsy giant with feet of clay, technologically backward and tactically inept. This ingrained prejudice was reflected in German analyses of the pre-war period. Although some German officers, particularly those who served as observers in the Soviet Union during the Treaty of Rupture, had glimpsed the potential of Soviet industrialization and military development, their warnings were largely ignored or minimized. The prevailing sentiment was one of racial and technological superiority. German engineers and designers were convinced that their meticulous craftsmanship, advanced metallurgy, and sophisticated optical systems placed them light years ahead of any potential adversary. The idea that a primitive, communist state could produce tanks that were not only numerically superior but also technologically superior in crucial aspects was simply inconceivable to many within the Wehrmacht High Command. The first days of Operation Barbarossa unfolded largely as the Germans had predicted. Initial Soviet resistance was often chaotic, disorganized, and overwhelmed by the speed and ferocity of the blitzkrieg. German tanks broke through Soviet lines, their guns quickly destroying the older T-26 and BT tanks. Morale was high. Commanders radioed reports of rapid advances and the collapse of enemy defenses. It seemed their predictions were coming true. The Soviet Union was indeed a paper tiger. Then the first reports began to arrive. Whispers, then increasingly urgent dispatches about enemy tanks that German anti-tank guns simply couldn't penetrate. These weren't lightly armored BTs. They were formidable machines, appearing almost out of nowhere, withstanding impacts that would have incapacitated a Panzer III. German tank crews, accustomed to seeing their projectiles ricochet or pierce enemy armor, suddenly found themselves facing an unprecedented and terrifying reality. Their main guns were useless. One of the earliest and most vivid examples of this clash occurred during the Battle of Ryazanie in Lithuania in late June 1941. The German 6th Panzer Division was advancing rapidly when it encountered a lone Soviet KV-1 heavy tank. This isolated vehicle, separated from its unit, had positioned itself across the division's main supply road. What followed was an almost surreal confrontation, a testament to the KV-1's incredible resilience and the profound misjudgment of the Germans. The KV-1, a monstrous machine weighing nearly 45 tons, was a marvel of Soviet engineering focused on brute force protection. It was equipped with a powerful 76.2mm L-11 cannon, capable of firing high explosive and armor-piercing projectiles. The Panzer 38T tanks, light tanks of Czech design that constituted a significant part of the division, fired their 3.7cm guns to no effect. The Panzer, the third tanks, with their 5cm guns, fared no better. Their projectiles simply ricocheting off the KV-1's sloped armor. Desperate, the Germans brought out their 5cm Pak 38 anti-tank guns. These were their newest and most powerful anti-tank weapons, capable of penetrating the frontal armor of most contemporary tanks. However, even these proved ineffective against the KV-1. The projectiles struck the tank with loud bangs, leaving only superficial dents, but failing to penetrate it. The largely invulnerable KV-1 returned fire with its 76.2mm gun, inflicting casualties and sowing panic. For an entire day, this single Kaubin -1 held off an entire German panzer division. German engineers attempted to destroy it with explosive charges, but were repelled by the tank's machine guns, or desperate close-quarters fighting. Even then, multiple direct hits were needed to finally disable the KV-1. Accounts vary, but it is believed the tank was hit by over 50 projectiles from various anti-tank weapons before finally being destroyed. The crew, despite the tank being immobilized, continued to resist 4 hours, fighting to the last man. This incident, though perhaps an anomaly in its dramatic isolation, was a chilling omen of what was to come. It was a harsh and brutal lesson for German tank crews. Their supposed technological superiority was a myth. Even more widespread and devastating encounters occurred during the massive tank battles that raged across the Brody-Dubno-Lutsk Triangle in late June and early July 1941. This was one of the largest tank battles of the entire war, involving thousands of tanks on both sides. In it, German forces, including elements of the 11th Panzer Division and the 16th Panzer Division, found themselves confronted with massive formations of Soviet KV-1 tanks, and even more shockingly, with the brand new T-34 medium tank. The T-34 was undoubtedly the most revolutionary tank design of World War II. Its impact on German tank development and doctrine was profound and immediate. Weighing approximately 26 tons, the T-34 combined an innovative sloped armor design, a powerful 76.2mm F-34 gun, and wide tracks that gave it excellent mobility over the muddy and often impassable terrain of the Eastern Front. Its sloped armor, typically 45mm thick on the frontal part of the hull and turret, offered protection equivalent to that of much thicker, vertically arranged armor against kinetic energy projectiles. German tank crews were horrified to discover that their 3.7 centimeters and 5 centimeters guns, even at close range, were virtually incapable of penetrating the T-34's frontal plate. The projectiles ricocheted without causing damage or shattered on impact. Only at close range, and often only by hitting the more vulnerable side or rear armor. Did a Panzer III or IV have any chance of destroying a T-34? Frontline accounts vividly illustrate this terror. German tank commanders reported facing T-34s in KV-1 South, firing multiple projectiles and watching them ricochet. One veteran recounted how a T-34 simply drove through a line of German anti-tank guns, crushing them beneath its tracks while absorbing dozens of impacts without suffering apparent damage. Another account described the desperation of German tank crews who, having exhausted their ammunition, resorted to ramming Soviet tanks or attempting to climb onto them to plant demolition charges, often at great personal cost. The psychological impact was immense. German soldiers, accustomed to quick victories and technological superiority, suddenly felt vulnerable, their weapons inadequate, and their confidence shaken. Consider the metallurgy and manufacturing of Soviet tanks. German engineers were accustomed to precise, high-quality steel. When examining captured T-34SA, they often found a coarser finish, sometimes even with visible weld beads, which would be unacceptable by German standards. However, the armor plates were incredibly strong. This was due, in part, to the specific alloy used by the Soviets and their innovative casting and rolling processes. The T-34's armor, while appearing less refined, was incredibly effective at repelling German kinetic energy projectiles. This forced the Germans to reconsider their own manufacturing processes and the ideal characteristics of an armor plate. They realized that effectiveness on the battlefield was not always about aesthetic perfection, but rather about the ability to provide raw protection. Another fascinating detail lies in the often overlooked design elements. The T-34's wide tracks, for example, weren't just for show. They significantly reduced ground pressure, allowing the tank to traverse soft terrain, snow, and mud that would bog down German tanks with their narrower tracks. This gave the T-34 a clear tactical advantage, especially during the notorious Rasputitsa seasons, when the Russian plains turned into impassable quagmires. German tanks, with their precise but delicate suspension systems and narrower tracks, frequently struggled, highlighting another aspect where Soviet simplicity translated into superior battlefield performance under specific conditions. The T-34's V2 diesel engine was another engineering marvel that caught the Germans by surprise. While German tanks ran on gasoline engines, the V2 was a powerful and multi-purpose diesel engine. Diesel is less volatile than gasoline, meaning a diesel tank hit by enemy fire was less likely to explode in a catastrophic fireball. This increased the crew's survivability, a critical factor in prolonged combat. Furthermore, the V2 engine, initially designed for aircraft, was extremely powerful for its size and weight, contributing to the T-34's impressive speed and agility. The Germans, recognizing these advantages, also began experimenting more seriously with diesel engines for their own tanks. Although few designs reached mass production during the war, the sheer number of tanks also proved to be an incredible curiosity. German intelligence, as mentioned, knew that the Soviets had many tanks, but drastically underestimated the speed at which new advanced tanks could be produced. When the T-34 and KV-1 tanks emerged, German commanders believed they were rare prototypes or limited production models. They could not conceive that these formidable machines were already being produced in significant quantities, and that Soviet industry, despite enormous losses and redeployment efforts, would continue to produce them by the thousands. This ability of the Soviet Union to absorb immense losses and still maintain formidable industrial production was a shock to the German war machine, which had always prioritized quality over quantity, presuming that a quick war would eliminate the need for large contingents. Individual stories of survival and heroism, often against overwhelming odds, also stand out as incredible curiosities. The lone KV-21 at Ryazany is one example, but there are countless others. German tank aces like Michael Wittmann and Otto Karius would later achieve fame for their incredible feats in Tigers and Panthers. But even they would recount desperate struggles against endless waves of T-34s and KV-1 South. The unwavering tenacity of Soviet tank crews, even in older and technologically inferior tanks, often surprised the Germans. This was a war fought not only with steel and fire, but with sheer willpower. Let us consider the initial tactical errors on the Soviet side, which, ironically, sometimes masked the true potential of their new tanks. Training was often inadequate, particularly in combined arms tactics. Many T-34s in KV-1 South were deployed in a fragmented fashion or in poorly coordinated attacks, making them vulnerable to German flanking maneuvers, air raids, or concentrated anti-tank fire. Communication failures were frequent. Had the Soviets managed to utilize their revolutionary tanks more effectively from the outset, the German impact might have been even greater, and their initial advances perhaps far less successful. The fact that, despite these tactical shortcomings, the T-34 and KV-1 still managed to cause widespread panic and devastation speaks volumes about their intrinsic design superiority. The German response was not limited to building better tanks. It also involved the development of more effective infantry anti-tank weapons. The Panzerfaust and Panzerschreck, rocket-propelled anti-tank weapons that would become iconic in the final stages of the war, were also a direct consequence of the need to give infantry a fighting chance against heavily armored Soviet tanks. Before these weapons, infantry often felt powerless against the T-34 and KV-1, a sentiment that contributed significantly to demoralization on the Eastern Front. The intelligence blunder itself is a curiosity worth examining. How could the Germans have been so wrong? Part of it was due to ideological arrogance, as mentioned. Another part was the effectiveness of Soviet secrecy. Although some German intelligence reports mentioned new Soviet tank designs, they were often dismissed as propaganda or exaggerated claims. The Soviets deliberately avoided showing their cutting-edge designs to foreign observers, displaying instead older, less impressive equipment. This worked in their favor, creating a devastating element of surprise. The Germans believed they could simply repeat their successes on the Western Front. Swift and morale collapse and immediate surrender. They failed to comprehend the depth of Soviet resolve, the vastness of their territory, and their willingness to endure unimaginable sacrifices. The scorched earth policy, the relocation of industries eastward, and the relentless counterattacks, even when seemingly futile, contributed to a war very different from the one German generals had anticipated. The formidable Soviet tanks were merely the most visible and terrifying manifestation of this deeper and more pervasive underestimation. As the war unfolded, the Eastern Front became a veritable cauldron of tank warfare, a relentless technological arms race. The initial shock gave way to adaptation and then to a brutal technological duel. The Panther and Tiger tanks further intensified the arms race, forcing the Soviets to respond. The Soviets introduced the T-34-85 Wheateadslager 85mm gun and improved three-man turret, providing better ergonomics and situational awareness for the crew. They also developed heavier tanks, such as the IS of Stalin series, which rivaled and in some respects surpassed the German Tigers in terms of firepower and armor. This constant exchange of designs and counter-designs was a direct legacy of the initial German underestimation in 1941. The Soviet tank industry, galvanized by the initial German attack, proved incredibly innovative and resilient, constantly producing improved versions of its existing designs and developing new ones. The sheer volume of Soviet tank production is an impressive curiosity. Despite losing millions of men and vast stretches of territory, despite having their industrial center repeatedly bombed and occupied, the Soviets produced over 84,000 T-34 tanks during the war alone. This far surpasses the production numbers of any type of German tank. The German commitment to quality and complex engineering meant they could never match this production. While a Tiger tank might be superior to a T-34-85 in one-on-one combat under ideal conditions, the reality of the Eastern Front was that tigers and panthers were always outnumbered, often massively. This quantitative superiority, combined with improved Soviet tactics and crew training, ultimately proved decisive. The experiences of German tank crews also changed drastically. The initial confidence of 1941, when panzers reigned supreme on the battlefield, gave way to an implacable determination, often tinged with fear and despair. They learned to respect the T-34, even if they sometimes looked down on its crude finish or ergonomic shortcomings. They knew that facing a T-34 meant a serious fight, and facing a KV-1, or later an IS-2, meant confronting a truly formidable opponent. The Panzertank Hunter units, equipped with powerful self-propelled anti-tank guns, became increasingly vital to the German defense. The myth of German technological invincibility, a pillar of their early war propaganda, was irrevocably shattered on the Eastern Front. The T-34 and KV-1 exposed a fundamental flaw in their pre-war assumptions and forced them to adopt a reactive, rather than proactive, stance in tank development. This reactive stance, while leading to truly remarkable machines like the Tiger and Panther, ultimately failed to overcome the numerical and logistical advantages that the Soviets, surprisingly, managed to maintain throughout the war. Consider the psychological impact on a German tank commander in 1941. One day he confidently led his Panzer III, sweeping through enemy resistance. The initial shock morphed into a reluctant respect and, for many, a profound fear of the endless and seemingly indestructible Soviet armored formations. It highlights how deeply ingrained prejudices can blind even the brightest military minds to emerging realities.